Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon and watched the massive alien ship approach. Earth, the vessel was 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built, and it moved through space like a predator stalking prey. Jake had seen many strange things during his 20 years in space, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. 3 months ago, humanity had received their first message from beyond the stars, and now, the Galactic Council had come to deliver their answer. The alien ship docked with the orbital station above Earth, and Jake felt his stomach tighten. Admiral Lisa Carter had warned him that this meeting would determine humanity's future, but she had not told him what to expect. Through the viewscreen, he watched as strange creatures emerged from the alien vessel. They moved with purpose and confidence like beings who had done this many times before. Down on Earth, President William Hayes waited in the United Nations building alongside Admiral Carter and dozens of other world leaders. The main assembly hall had been cleared of all normal business to make room for this historic meeting. Carter studied the intelligence reports one more time and frowned. The aliens had been scanning Earth's defenses for weeks now, and their behavior suggested they already knew exactly what they planned to offer. The first alien to enter the hall was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It stood 12 feet tall, and its body appeared to be made of living crystal that shifted colors as it moved. Behind it came creatures that looked like giant insects walking upright, and others that resembled reptiles but moved with mechanical precision. Jake Morrison had joined the meeting via video link from the New Horizon, and he watched as these beings arranged themselves around the assembly hall with practiced ease. The crystal being stepped forward and spoke in perfect English, though its voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with grinding stone. It introduced itself as Overlord HFY of the Galactic Council and explained that it represented 12 advanced civilizations that had governed the galaxy for over 10,000 years. The way it spoke made it clear that humanity was expected to be grateful for this attention. Admiral Carter listened carefully as HFY outlined what he called a generous offer of membership in the Galactic Council. Earth would be classified as a Category 5 member world, which was the lowest level reserved for primitive species. Humans would be allowed to mine raw materials from their own planet and sell them to more advanced civilizations at prices set by the Council. In return, humanity would receive protection from hostile forces and limited access to basic galactic technology. The terms became more restrictive as HFY continued speaking. All human military forces would be disbanded immediately and their weapons surrendered to Council representatives. No human vessel would be permitted to travel beyond the Sol system without express permission from the Council. Earth's population would be capped at current levels, and any expansion to other worlds would require Council approval that might take centuries to obtain. President Hayes asked about trade agreements and cultural exchange, but HFY dismissed these concerns with a wave of one crystal in hand. Primitive species were not expected to contribute anything beyond raw labor and basic materials. The Council had evolved beyond such crude needs thousands of years ago and had little interest in human culture or scientific achievements. Jake Morrison felt anger building in his chest as he listened to the alien's condescending tone. Commander Ryan Walsh joined him on the bridge, and both men watched as the aliens treated Earth's leaders like children who should be grateful for any attention at all. Walsh had spent years defending human shipping lanes from pirates and asteroids, but now he was being told that human military forces were unnecessary and primitive. The insectoid creatures that HFY identified as Zephyrians began setting up scanning equipment around the assembly hall without asking permission. Their movements were quick and precise, but they showed no regard for human customs or diplomatic protocol. One of them brushed past Secretary of Defense Karen Brown as if she were a piece of furniture and continued working without acknowledgement. Admiral Carter noticed that the reptilian beings called Vorthak were taking detailed recordings of everything in the room, including the positions of security guards and the layout of emergency exits. Their behavior suggested they were gathering intelligence for future use rather than simply documenting a diplomatic meeting. She made a mental note to review all security footage after the aliens departed. Overlord HFY announced that humanity had exactly 72 hours to provide their answer to the Council's generous offer. He explained that refusal was not truly an option since primitive species could not survive in the galaxy without Council protection. Pirates and hostile forces would destroy any unprotected civilization within months of their discovery. The Council's offer represented humanity's only path to survival in a dangerous universe. The alien delegation prepared to depart, but Zexthai delivered one final message that chilled everyone in the room. He informed President Hayes that several human colonies had already been established on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. These settlements would need to be abandoned immediately as they represented unauthorized expansion beyond Earth. Any humans found living outside their home planet after the agreement was signed would be relocated to designated areas under Council supervision. After the aliens left, Jake Morrison remained on his bridge staring out at the stars. The galaxy suddenly seemed much larger and more dangerous than before. He thought about his daughter Amy, who worked as a pilot transporting supplies between Earth and Mars. Under the new agreement, she would never be allowed to fly beyond Earth's atmosphere again. Admiral Carter walked through the empty assembly hall. After everyone else had gone home, she studied the places where the alien scanners had been positioned and noted which areas they had examined most carefully. The Galactic Council's offer was clearly designed to reduce humanity to the status of servants or slaves. They wanted Earth's resources and labor, but had no interest in treating humans as equals. Commander Walsh reviewed the tactical data from the alien ship's approach and found disturbing patterns in their behavior. The vessel had scanned every human military installation during its journey to Earth, and its crew had identified the locations of weapon manufacturing facilities and troop deployments. This was not the behavior of peaceful diplomats, but of conquerors planning an invasion. Dr. Elena Rodriguez analyzed the limited technological samples the aliens had provided as examples of the benefits humanity might receive. The devices were clearly outdated by Council standards and appeared to be designed for species with limited intelligence. It was like offering stone tools to beings who had already developed metallurgy. As night fell over, Earth President Hayes met privately with Admiral Carter in the Oval Office. The weight of the decision pressed down on both of them like a physical force. Accepting the Council's terms would mean the end of human independence and dreams of exploring the galaxy. Refusing might mean the destruction of their entire civilization. Carter looked out the window at the lights of Washington, D.C. and made a decision that would change the course of human history. She turned to the president and spoke in a quiet voice that carried the steel of absolute determination. She told him that humanity would accept the Council's offer, but they would also begin immediate preparations for the day when acceptance would no longer be necessary. The meeting ended with President Hayes authorizing Admiral Carter to begin what she called Project Arabus. The details were classified at the highest levels, but its purpose was simple insurance against galactic neighbors who might not always have humanity's best interests in mind. The Galactic Council had made their opening move, but the game was far from over. 6 weeks had passed since Earth accepted the Galactic Council's terms, and the reality of alien rule had become brutally clear. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks stood on a hillside in Montana, watching massive mining machines tear apart the landscape below. The Vorthek overseers moved between human work. Crews with energy weapons ready and their reptilian faces showed no emotion as they pushed exhausted workers beyond human limits. Danny had fought in 3 wars defending human freedom, but now he watched his own species being treated like livestock. The alien mining operation ran 24 hours a day, and workers were given only 4 hours of rest before being forced back to their stations. Those who collapsed from exhaustion were dragged away by Vorthak guards and never returned to their families. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked in her laboratory deep beneath the Pentagon, studying pieces of alien technology that Admiral Carter had secretly obtained. The equipment was more advanced than anything humans had built, but Elena discovered something interesting about how it functioned. Every alien device operated on specific energy frequencies that never varied, and their defensive systems responded to threats in predictable patterns. Elena ran her fingers across the surface of a Zephyrian scanner and felt the vibrations it produced while operating. The device was incredibly sophisticated, but it had been designed by a species that thought in rigid patterns. There was no creativity in its construction and no adaptability in its programming. It worked perfectly for its intended purpose but could not handle unexpected situations. Colonel Pete Johnson supervised construction crews deep underground beneath major cities around the world. The official reports claimed they were building expanded subway systems to handle growing urban populations, but the reality was far different. Pete watched as military engineers hollowed out vast chambers in the bedrock and installed hidden power systems that did not appear on any civilian blueprints. The underground facilities were connected by tunnels that stretched for miles beneath city streets. Pete had spent months planning the construction to avoid detection by alien orbital scanners in every entrance. Was disguised to look like maintenance access for legitimate municipal projects. The Vorthek guards who patrolled the surface had no idea that an entire military complex was being built beneath their feet. Captain Amy Foster piloted her cargo transport through the asteroid belt on what appeared to be a routine supply run to mining stations in the outer solar system. Her official manifest listed food and equipment for civilian workers, but the sealed containers in her cargo hold contained something far more dangerous. Amy checked her navigation display and confirmed that she was approaching the coordinates Admiral Carter had provided. The asteroid looked like any other piece of space rock floating in the void, but Amy knew it contained a hidden facility that had been under construction for months. She docked with a concealed airlock and watched as automated systems unloaded her cargo. The containers held weapon components and power cells that would soon be assembled into something the aliens would never expect. Back on Earth, the Galactic Council grew more confident in their control over humanity with each passing day. Overlord Zexthai established his headquarters in Geneva and began issuing new regulations that restricted human movement and communication. All internet traffic was monitored by Zephyrian surveillance systems, and any discussion of resistance was met with immediate punishment. The Crystal Being held regular meetings with Earth's remaining political leaders and made it clear that humanity's probationary period was nearly over. Soon, the Council would implement the final phase of their integration program, which would involve relocating human military personnel to re-education centers on distant worlds. Zexthai explained that former soldiers represented the greatest threat to galactic peace and required special attention. Admiral Carter attended these meetings and nodded politely while the aliens spoke about humanity's bright future as productive members of galactic society. Inside her mind, she counted the days until Project Arabus would be ready for activation. Every condescending word from the Council's representative added fuel to the fire that burned in her heart. Commander Ryan Walsh worked aboard Unity Station, which the aliens believed was simply a civilian orbital platform for monitoring space traffic. The Vorthak had inspected the station several times and found nothing suspicious in its communications equipment and sensor arrays. They never thought to look inside the sealed manufacturing bays that had been disguised as storage compartments. Ryan supervised teams of engineers who worked in shifts to avoid detection while they assembled fighter craft using reverse-engineered alien technology. The ships were smaller than traditional human vessels, but they incorporated defensive systems and weapons that the Council would not expect from a primitive species. Each fighter was designed to operate independently without relying on large support vessels that might be spotted by enemy scanners. Dr. Elena Rodriguez made a breakthrough while studying the biological samples she had collected from alien visitors to Earth. The Council species had been using artificial enhancements for so many generations that they had lost most of their natural abilities. Their enhanced strength and intelligence came from technological implants, rather than biological evolution, and those implants had a critical weakness. Elena discovered that the enhancement systems could be disrupted by specific types of electromagnetic interference. The aliens had become so dependent on their artificial abilities that losing them would leave them helpless. She began working on a device that could generate the right frequency patterns to disable the implants without affecting human technology. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks received new orders that made his blood run cold. The Vorthek overseers had decided that human workers were not productive enough and would begin using pain stimulation devices to increase their output. Any worker who failed to meet daily quotas would be subjected to neural torture until their performance improved. Danny watched as the alien devices were installed in worker dormitories and felt his hands clench into fists. He had sworn an oath to protect innocent civilians, but the Council's terms of surrender prevented him from taking any military action. The aliens seemed to enjoy testing how far they could push humanity. Before someone finally snapped, Captain Amy Foster completed her final supply run to the hidden asteroid bases and received confirmation that all weapon platforms were now operational. The outer solar system had been transformed into a network of concealed military installations that could strike at any target approaching Earth. The aliens had no idea that their victims had been quietly preparing for war. The Council announced that the transfer of human military personnel would begin in exactly 2 weeks. Overlord Zexthai informed Admiral Carter that she would be among the first group sent for re-education, and he looked forward to discussing her experiences when she returned as a productive member of galactic society. Carter smiled and thanked the alien for his consideration while mentally reviewing the final preparations for Project Arabus. The trap had been perfectly set, and the Council had walked into it with the arrogance of predators who had never encountered effective prey. In 2 weeks, they would discover that humanity was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The night before the scheduled transfer, Admiral Carter stood in her office and looked out at the lights of Washington, D.C. for what she believed might be the last time. In 12 hours, she was supposed to board an alien transport ship along with every other senior military officer on Earth. The Galactic Council believed they were removing the last threat to their control, but they had made a critical mistake in their calculations. Carter pressed a single button on her desk and spoke 2 words into her communicator that would change everything. Project Arabus was now active, and across the planet thousands of people who were supposed to be dead or missing suddenly came back to life. The human military had never been disbanded, despite what the aliens believed, and every soldier had been waiting for this moment. Major Chris Taylor emerged from a hidden tunnel directly beneath the main Council garrison in Geneva along with 50 other soldiers who had been living underground for weeks. The Vorthek guards above had no idea that humans had been digging beneath their feet and studying their defensive positions. Chris checked his weapon one final time and smiled grimly as he remembered the training sessions that had prepared him for this moment. The alien garrison was protected by energy shields and automated defense systems that could destroy any attacking force before it reached the perimeter. The Council had designed their fortifications to repel attacks from above or from the surrounding area, but they had never considered the possibility of enemies emerging from below. Chris and his team moved through maintenance tunnels that connected to the building's foundation and began placing explosive charges on structural supports. Commander Sharon Bell coordinated simultaneous attacks on alien installations in 12 major cities around the world. Her communication system used buried fiber optic cables that the Zephyrian surveillance network had never detected. Every human strike team had been positioned days in advance, and they moved with precision that would have impressed their alien overseers if those overseers had lived long enough to appreciate it. The first explosions began at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time, and within minutes every Council facility on Earth was under attack. The aliens had grown comfortable with their superior technology and overwhelming firepower, but they had never faced an enemy that attacked from directions they could not predict. Human soldiers emerged from sewers and subway tunnels and rooftops and abandoned buildings that had been quietly converted into weapons caches. Captain Ryan Walsh watched from Unity Station as the space battle began with devastating effectiveness. The orbital platform that the aliens believed was harmless suddenly opened hidden weapons bays and launched a squadron of fighters that incorporated captured Council technology. Ryan had spent months studying alien combat tactics, and he knew exactly how they would respond to unexpected threats. The Council fleet moved into standard defensive formations that had served them well for thousands of years, but they were fighting humans who did not follow standard patterns. Captain Amy Foster led her squadron in an attack run that violated every principle of galactic warfare and caught the alien ships completely off guard. Human pilots did not care about maintaining formation or preserving expensive equipment, and their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory terrified their opponents. Dr. Elena Rodriguez activated the electromagnetic pulse device she had spent weeks perfecting and watched as every enhanced alien within 50 miles suddenly lost their artificial abilities. The Vortex soldiers who had been terrorizing human workers with their superior strength found themselves reduced to their natural reptilian forms. The Zephyrians who relied on neural implants for their lightning-fast reflexes became as slow and clumsy as ordinary insects. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Brooks led the assault on the Montana mining facility where he had watched his people suffer under alien oppression for weeks. The Vorthek overseers reached for their energy weapons but discovered that their targeting systems no longer functioned properly. Danny and his soldiers moved through the facility with grim determination and showed the aliens exactly what human anger looked like. When it was finally unleashed, the space battle above Earth lasted only 3 hours before the last Council ship was either destroyed or forced to retreat. Captain Amy Foster reported that human losses were minimal while alien casualties were total. The fighters that Ryan Walsh had built in secret proved superior to anything the Council possessed because they combined advanced technology with human creativity and tactical innovation. On the ground, the fighting continued until dawn as human forces systematically captured or eliminated every alien installation on the planet. The underground facilities that Colonel Pete Johnson had constructed provided perfect staging areas for coordinated strikes that caught the invaders completely by surprise. Alien commanders who had dismissed humans as primitive savages found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents who fought with scientific precision and savage determination. Overlord Zexthai was captured while trying to reach his escape ship at the Geneva spaceport. The crystalline being had ruled over primitive species for centuries, but he had never encountered resistance like this. Major Chris Taylor and his soldiers surrounded the alien leader and watched as his arrogant confidence crumbled into something resembling fear. The crystal being demanded to know how humans had managed to hide such extensive military preparations from Council surveillance. Admiral Carter arrived at the spaceport as Zexthai was being secured, and she looked down at the alien with cold satisfaction. She explained that the Council had made their first mistake by assuming that human surrender meant human submission. Carter walked around the captured alien and continued speaking. In a voice that carried years of suppressed fury, she told Zexthai that humans had learned everything they needed to know about Council technology and tactics during the weeks of occupation. Every alien patrol had been watched and studied and recorded until human strategists understood exactly how their enemies thought and fought. The Admiral explained that the Council's second mistake had been underestimating human adaptability and creativity. Alien species followed predictable patterns that had worked for thousands of years, but humans specialized in finding new solutions to old problems. The Council had brought superior technology to Earth, but humans had reverse-engineered that technology and improved upon it. Commander Ryan Walsh reported from Unity Station that all remaining Council ships had fled the solar system and were heading back toward their home territories. The aliens who had arrived at Earth as conquerors were now running for their lives from a species they had dismissed as harmless primitives. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted dramatically in a single night. Dr. Elena Rodriguez confirmed that her electromagnetic pulse weapon had permanently disabled the enhancement systems of every captured alien, the beings who had ruled the galaxy through artificial superiority were now reduced to their natural biological capabilities. Without their technological advantages, they were no more dangerous than any other life form. Admiral Carter stood over the defeated Overlord Zexthai and delivered a message that would echo through galactic history. She told the alien that humanity had accepted the lowest place in the Council hierarchy, but they had learned to make the best use of that position. The Council had never bothered to look beneath their feet, and that oversight had cost them everything. With Earth secured, Admiral Carter wasted no time beginning the second phase of humanity's revenge against the Galactic Council. The hidden asteroid bases that Captain Amy Foster had established during her supply runs revealed their true purpose. as launch platforms for humanity's first interstellar strike force. The aliens who had fled Earth carried news of their defeat back to Council territory, but they had no idea that human forces were already following them home. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked around the clock in her laboratory, perfecting the digital virus that would be humanity's most devastating weapon. The program was designed to target the artificial enhancement systems that every Council species relied upon for their superiority. Unlike biological warfare, this electronic plague attacked the technological implants that had been integrated into alien bodies for thousands of generations. Elena tested the virus on captured alien equipment and watched with satisfaction as the sophisticated devices began to malfunction and shut down permanently. The enhancement systems that gave Council species their strength and intelligence and speed would slowly degrade until the aliens were reduced to their original biological forms. Most of them had not used their natural abilities for so long that they would be helpless without their artificial advantages. Colonel Pete Johnson led the first human strike force aboard converted mining vessels that looked like simple cargo haulers to any alien scanner. The ships had been modified with hidden weapon systems and faster-than-light drives that incorporated captured Council technology. Pete's mission was to reach the Vorthek homeworld, where thousands of human slaves were being worked to death in alien mining facilities. The journey to Vorthek space took 3 weeks, and Pete used the time to drill his soldiers on the tactics they would need for fighting on an alien world. The reptilian species had ruled their planet for centuries, and their cities were heavily fortified against attack. Human forces would need to strike quickly and precisely to free the enslaved workers before Vorthek reinforcements could respond. Major Chris Taylor led covert operations teams to a dozen different Council worlds with orders to make contact with other oppressed species. To his surprise, humans were not the only civilization that had suffered under alien rule. The galaxy was filled with enslaved peoples who had been conquered and subjugated by the Council over thousands of years, on a world called Kepler Prime. Chris met with representatives of the Nexari people who had been forced to surrender their planet after a brief war 50 years earlier. The blue-skinned humanoids possessed advanced mathematics and engineering skills, but they had been classified as Category 4 members and restricted to providing technical services for their conquerors. The Nexari had been waiting decades for someone to show them how to fight back. Commander Sharon Bell coordinated information warfare using the captured alien communication networks to broadcast the truth about humanity's victory across Council space. For the first time in galactic history, the subject worlds learned that the mighty Council could be defeated by a species that had been dismissed as primitive savages. The news spread like wildfire through underground resistance movements that had been planning rebellion for generations. Sharon's broadcasts included detailed technical specifications for the weapons and tactics that had proven effective against Council forces. She also transmitted Dr. Rodriguez's virus program to rebel groups on dozens of worlds and provided instructions for modifying it to target different types of alien enhancement systems. The information reached species that had been planning hopeless uprisings and suddenly gave them the tools they needed for success. Captain Amy Foster commanded a squadron of the new human fighters as they struck at isolated Council outposts throughout the outer territories. The aliens had never faced opponents who attacked without warning and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Human forces used hit-and-run tactics that violated every principle of civilized galactic warfare but proved devastatingly effective against enemies who expected formal declarations and organized battle formations. The Council attempted to respond to the growing rebellion but found their fleets stretched thin across hundreds of worlds where subject peoples were rising in coordinated revolt. Overlord Zexthai remained a prisoner on Earth, but other Council leaders tried desperately to maintain control of their crumbling empire. They ordered massive retaliation strikes against rebel worlds, but discovered that their own forces were beginning to suffer from the effects of the digital virus. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the spread of her creation through captured alien communication channels and smiled as reports came in from across the galaxy. Vorthok soldiers were losing their enhanced strength and speed at critical moments during combat operations. Zephyrian commanders found their neural implants failing just when they needed to coordinate complex battle strategies. The technological advantages that had kept the Council in power for millennia were disappearing one system at a time. Colonel Pete Johnson reached the Vorthok homeworld and launched his assault on the primary mining complex where human slaves had been imprisoned for months. The reptilian guards were caught completely off guard by the attack, and their defensive systems failed to function properly due to the virus infection. Pete's soldiers moved through the facility like avenging angels and freed over 2,000 human workers who had been given up for dead. The liberated humans provided intelligence about other slave camps throughout Vorthok territory, and Pete began planning additional rescue operations. He discovered that the aliens had been systematically breaking down human prisoners through torture and psychological manipulation, but they had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. Even after months of abuse, the freed slaves were ready to fight alongside their rescuers. Major Chris Taylor established a network of rebel cells across Council space as more and more species joined the growing resistance movement. The Kandari brought their expertise in stealth technology, while the Ramari contributed advanced medical knowledge that helped treat wounded fighters. Each species had unique abilities that had been suppressed by the Council but could now be used against their former masters. The rebellion spread faster than the Council could contain it, and soon entire sectors of the galaxy were in open revolt. Admiral Carter received reports that suggested the alien empire was collapsing under the weight of simultaneous uprisings on hundreds of worlds. The species that had been kept divided and conquered for thousands of years were finally uniting against their oppressors. Commander Sharon Bell intercepted Council communications that revealed the true extent of their panic and desperation. The aliens who had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority were now begging their own military forces to remain loyal as enhancement systems failed and subject peoples broke free from slavery. The mighty Galactic Council was discovering that their empire had been built on foundations of fear rather than respect. Admiral Carter stood in her command center and watched real-time displays showing the progress of human forces across the galaxy. The species that had been offered the lowest place in the alien hierarchy was now leading a revolution that would reshape the entire known universe. She opened a communication channel that reached every Council world and delivered a message that would be remembered for generations to come. Carter's voice carried across the stars as she spoke directly to the aliens who had tried to enslave humanity. She told them that they had wanted human surrender, but instead they had gotten human revolution, and that revolution was spreading to every corner of their crumbling empire. The hunt for freedom had begun, and it would not end until every sentient being in the galaxy was free to choose their own destiny. The final battle for the galaxy would not be fought in the darkness of space, but in the heart of the Council's ancient seat of power. Nexus Prime was a massive station built around a neutron star that had served as the government center for over 10,000 years. The aliens believed their fortress was impregnable because no enemy had ever successfully attacked it, but they had never faced an opponent like humanity. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the assault fleet that approached Nexus Prime with grim determination. The man who had witnessed humanity's humiliation 6 months earlier now led the forces that would deliver the Council's final judgment. His ship carried representatives from dozens of liberated species who had suffered under alien rule and were eager to see justice done. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's digital virus had spread throughout Council space and crippled the technological advantages that had kept the aliens in power for millennia. The enhancement systems that gave Council species their artificial abilities were failing across the galaxy, and ancient rulers found themselves struggling with bodies and minds they had not used in thousands of years. The mighty Galactic Council was discovering what it felt like to be helpless. The Zephyrians, who had once moved with lightning speed, now crawled through their corridors like ordinary insects. Their neural implants that provided superhuman intelligence had been reduced to useless metal and silicon by the virus infection. The insectoid beings who had dismissed humans as primitive creatures now possessed thinking abilities that were barely above animal level. Colonel Pete Johnson led ground forces through the outer sections of Nexus Prime as alien defenders fell back in confusion and terror. The Vorthix soldiers who had terrorized human workers with their enhanced strength could barely lift their weapons without artificial assistance. Pete's soldiers advanced methodically through corridors that had never seen warfare and showed their enemies exactly what human fury looked like when it was unleashed without restraint. The station's defensive systems had been designed to repel attacks from massive fleets using conventional weapons and tactics. The Council had never imagined that their enemies would infiltrate the facility using captured technology and fight with the savage creativity that humans brought to every battle. The aliens found themselves facing opponents who combined advanced equipment with primitive aggression, and the combination proved overwhelming. Captain Amy Foster coordinated with rebel fleets from across the galaxy as they struck at the remaining Council strongholds throughout known space. The Nexari brought their mathematical precision to targeting systems, while the Kandari used stealth technology to position strike forces where the enemy least expected them. The Rimari provided medical support that kept human and alien rebels fighting long after they should have collapsed from exhaustion. The various oppressed species had learned from humanity's example that freedom was not something to be granted by others but something to be taken by force when necessary. The galaxy that had been divided and conquered for thousands of years was finally uniting against the common enemy that had enslaved them all. The Council's greatest weapon had always been keeping their subjects isolated and afraid, but that weapon had been turned against them. Major Chris Taylor fought his way through the inner chambers of Nexus Prime, alongside warriors from a dozen different worlds who had all suffered under Council oppression. The alien administrators who had ruled the galaxy from comfortable offices found themselves facing enemies who had every reason to hate them. The bureaucrats who had signed the orders for countless acts of genocide and slavery now faced the consequences of their decisions. Commander Sharon Bell maintained communication links between all the rebel forces as they systematically took control of the ancient station. Her broadcasts reached every corner of the galaxy and provided real-time updates on the battle that would determine the future of all sentient life. The species that had been told they were inferior to their council masters watched as those same masters were defeated by the primitive humans they had tried to enslave. The fighting reached the central command chamber where the surviving council leaders had barricaded themselves behind energy shields and automated defenses. Admiral Carter led a combined force of humans and liberated aliens through the final barriers and came face to face with the beings who had ruled the galaxy through fear and intimidation for 10,000 years. The council members who remained alive were pitiful shadows of their former selves. Without their enhancement systems, they could barely stand upright, and their artificial confidence had been replaced by very real terror. The crystalline beings who had seemed so mighty during humanity's first contact now looked like fragile sculptures that might shatter at any moment. Overlord Zexthai had been brought from Earth to witness the final destruction of everything he had worked to build during his long lifetime. The alien who had offered humanity the lowest place in the galactic hierarchy now knelt before the species he had tried to enslave. Carter looked down at the defeated creature and felt no satisfaction in his humiliation, only grim determination. To ensure this could never happen again, the Admiral spoke to the assembled council members, and her words were broadcast to every world in the galaxy. She told them that they had created an empire based on the suffering of others, and that empire was now paying the price for its cruelty. The aliens had offered humanity a choice between submission and destruction, but they had forgotten that there was always a third option. Carter explained that humans had chosen revolution, and that choice had infected the galaxy like a virus spreading from world to world. The Council had kept their subjects divided and afraid for thousands of years, but humanity had shown them that their oppressors could be defeated by courage and determination and the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. The surviving council members begged for mercy and offered to negotiate new terms that would give the rebel species more rights and freedoms. Carter listened to their pleas with cold indifference and then delivered humanity's final verdict. She told them that the time for negotiation had ended when they decided to treat other sentient beings as property rather than equals. The Galactic Council was formally dissolved and its surviving members were placed under arrest to await trial for crimes against countless civilizations. The ancient station that had served as the center of galactic government for millennia was converted into a memorial for all those who had died under alien oppression. The new government that replaced the council would be based on principles of equality and cooperation rather than domination and fear. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the fleet of vessels from dozens of different worlds that had come together to fight for freedom. The man who had begun this story as a witness to humanity's humiliation now commanded respect from species across the galaxy. Earth had been offered the lowest place in the alien hierarchy, but had earned the highest place in the new order that was being born. The galaxy was free, and humanity had kept its promise to make the Council pay for their arrogance and cruelty. The species that had been dismissed as primitive savages had proven that the most dangerous force in the universe was not superior technology or artificial enhancement, but the simple desire to be free that burned in the heart of every living being.